Hello and welcome to episode 125 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devon Dundee. I'm joined by my co-host, Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. The sun is out. It's really, really hot. I am literally drenched as we talk. You know, one thing that British people commonly do is complain about the weather. Whether it's too cold, it's too hot, it's never quite in the middle. It has meant that I've been constantly on the go, but you're also about to be on the go, Devon. A well-deserved holiday, I think. You're making tracks pretty much after we record this episode.
Yep, as soon as we hit stop, I'm headed off for a little family vacation, some lake time, little theme park time. It's going to be great. One thing I won't be doing is bringing my Apple TV with me because I don't have my own Apple TV Go set up just yet, Sigmund. Have you been taking your Apple TV Go with you on your travels?
I have, and a little bit of an update on the Apple TV Go since beta season, because there's one thing in the Apple TV Go article, which we'll have linked once again in the show notes this week. One limitation that there wasn't an easy way of being able to share the Apple TV Go to visionOS, right? And then be able to share that in a FaceTime call. There was kind of a trick where you could have an iPad logged into a different account and have that join as a third party in a FaceTime call. Well, since the introduction of Vision Pro being an AirPlay receiver, things are a lot more easier. And in fact, when it comes to spatial FaceTime calls with other Vision Pro users, it's fantastic. I can bring in the Apple TV with my Apple TV Go, and we can both watch, and most importantly, we can both listen to the Apple TV and whatever's playing on it. And of course, you could hook up a VHS recorder, you could hook up any external source. The interesting thing about it is when you're in a spatial call, you get the spatial experience, right? So you have spatial audio coming from a certain direction, and it's just a really, really cool experience. So I kind of teased that this was a workaround that I had found when the second developer betas for tvOS 18 launched this week, which we'll be getting into in a little bit. But yeah, I'm just really, really happy that this is something that's possible. You can share AirPlayed screens within a FaceTime call on Apple Vision Pro. I think that opens up to a lot of really interesting future possibilities.
It really does. That's such a cool discovery and a great little addition to the Apple TV Go setup, the ability to share that screen with other people. I have to say the AirPlay mirroring in visionOS 2 beta has been really solid for me as well. I've been trying it out with my iPad, and I have to say I actually upgraded my iPad Pro to the iPadOS beta just to get AirPlay mirroring to my Vision Pro because it doesn't work with, obviously, iPadOS 17. So, yeah, that feature is really great. It's one of those additions that kind of went under the radar, I think, at the keynote, but I think it's actually going to be a big change for people like you and me who spend a lot of time in visionOS.
Now, we started this kind of opening segment with you saying you haven't got an Apple TV Go set up just yet. Does that mean that such a setup is in your future?
You know, it's always in the back of my mind. It's a really cool concept, and like you, having access to tvOS when I'm out and about would be amazing. So never say never, Sigmund.
Very cool. Well, with that said, everything coming up on the show this week, we have a recap of the limited series, The Big Cigar. Lots of follow-up on previous discussions. I think it's going to get quite feisty at certain points. And we start with this week's highlight, Apple Original Limited Series, Land of Women. A New York socialite is forced to flee to a charming Spanish wine town with her mother and daughter. She finds herself navigating small-town quirks whilst also confronting her deepest family secrets and a pair of bumbling hitmen.
My name is Gala Scott, and my life was perfect.
Your husband running a little late, huh?
Oh, you're the caterers. How much do I owe you?
$15 million.
Until my husband skipped town with all of our money. Mamá, vamos de excursión a tu pueblo en España. No tenemos casa y mi coche está roto.
I hate this town.
Sigo sin saber dónde está Fred, pero lo voy a solucionar.
Starring Ava Longoria, who also executive produces, Carmen Mora, Victoria Bazou, and Santiago Cabrera. This is created by Ramon Campos, Gemma Arnera, and Paul Fernandez, and is directed by Iris Award winner Carlos Cedés, and inspired by Sandra Benenda's novel La Tierra de los Meres, a show steeped in beautiful scenery, telling a multi-generational female-led story. What did you think of Land of Women so far, Devon?
I'm having fun with this one so far. Just a quick synopsis of the pilot to give people some context. Gayla, played by Eva Longoria, is on the cusp of opening her very own New York wine store when she is threatened by two mobsters who say her husband owes them $15 million. He goes on the run and tells her to do the same, so she tricks her mother and daughter into flying to Spain with her for what she calls a girls' trip. And things go awry when Gayla crashes her car into a local farmer's tractor, and the women find out that their family home has been sold, leaving them stranded with no place to stay. So this is an interesting sort of fish out of water story, of course, with the twist of the ruse that Gayla is pulling on her mother and daughter, trying to cover up the fact that they're in a lot of trouble here. They've got some very bad people after them, and you kind of get a little bit also of the mobsters as they're in their pursuit of this family as well. I'll say I laughed during the first two episodes. The tone seems a little uneven. There's times when it feels very dramatic and, intense, and then there's times where it feels more like you're supposed to be laughing. And they're billing this as a comedy, and I would say it succeeds as a comedy in the sense of making me laugh. But there are moments when I'm not sure how high the stakes are, I guess, and exactly how this is all going to play out. So I would say go in ready to laugh, but also just probably be prepared a little bit for maybe a mismatch of tones there. Have you had that same experience?
I have, in a way. So I also found that the pacing is probably a little all over the place. But I think the thing that kind of threw me a little bit, at least with the first episode, was the intro's US based, the scenes are in English, and I think there's about as much time given to the and I think there's about as much time given to the backdrop of the situation as there was in the trailer in the first episode. And as soon as you get to the point where Gayla and her mother and daughter are about to make their way to Spain, there's a heavy switch to Spanish, and then once they arrive in Spain, Catalan. And also the style changes. Like, we're in the US, the first couple of minutes are very Desperate Housewives style. You have that soundtrack, which is really fun, and suddenly the tone, as you said, it changes into something very different. It is a switch up I wasn't expected. A bit of a bait and switch, actually, is what I would say. I think this is a show that, obviously, there's 6 episodes. I've seen 2. I think it's a show that could grow on me.
Yeah, that change of culture, that shift in location, it's tricky to navigate, and maybe a little bit of what we're feeling is also what the characters are feeling. So it could be a little bit intentional about just, again, that kind of fish out of water experience where we're feeling a little uncomfortable with the shift and they're feeling a little uncomfortable with the shift. So that could be a little bit of it. I'll say they tried to smooth it over a little bit with some narration by Ava Longoria, summing up like the lessons that she's learning as she goes along the way. They could have done without that, honestly. It feels a little out of place and just like an extra little element that honestly it doesn't give you a lot of context, and it doesn't really add anything in my mind. I thought it was kind of jarring. On a positive note, I will say Carmen Maura is a treat to behold. I love her character, Julia. She's just so much fun. And with her, we get some interplay between the past and the present. We get some flashbacks back to when she was in this town, La Muga, as a child growing up and as a teenager. And that part I found really fun and also touching just going back to the place where you grew up after all these years and reconnecting with these people and these places. So that part I really enjoyed. And also just Julia in the present day as a grandmother. She's just really fun and unpredictable. You never quite know what she's going to do, but she's always got a funny line. And she's also got some vague memory issues, but I think she kind of plays that up a little bit to her advantage every once in a while. So she's a really fun character. I'd say of all the characters on the show so far, she's the one who stuck out to me and I enjoyed the most. Is there anyone who stuck out to you?
Well, actually, you saying that, there was one thing that really stuck out to me on the first episode, and that is the relationship between Gayla and her mother. When you go into like the memory vault, I would say, we're shown there's a particular scene where a young Julia is skinny dipping in the middle of the day. And she's like this vibrant, really kind of exciting person. Gayla is dealing with a different version of her mother. And whilst her mother is re-experiencing that skinny dipping moment of her youth, there is like that disconnect. And I think as someone that lives with older people, and sometimes, you know, there are certain frustrations that do seep in, you often forget about the fact that they lived the life as a person that you never saw. And I thought that was a really strong takeaway from especially the debut episode. And I think we see that more and more in the second episode. So that's a positive from me. I would also say the character of Amat, played by Santiago Cabrera, is the new owner of the family home. And even though Gayla and Amat are at loggerheads, I think it's pretty clear what predictable direction both characters will go in together. This, I think, I don't think it's a perfect show by any means. I do like the fact that we're seeing more Spanish language content, and that is a bonus not only for the platform that Apple are putting together and continue to have success with, for people that maybe aren't used to subtitles and watching things outside of the English language. So that's always going to be a good thing. I will say, I think this is, as I say, not the perfect show by any means, but it's going to be an easy watch, and I think a lot of people will enjoy it. And, you know, I do like my kind of intense twists, and there's plenty of that on Apple TV Plus. So there is nothing wrong with an easy watch for once.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned it at the top, but once again, I want to shout out just the gorgeous settings, the Spanish countryside with those vineyards. I mean, it's beautiful where they got to shoot this show. I'm jealous of everyone who got to spend time out there and do that. And honestly, it's worth taking in just for that, in addition to, like you said, being an easy watch. Land of Women debuts today with its first 2 of 6 episodes across all of your screens on Apple TV+. This week saw the release of tvOS 18 Developer Beta 2 on Monday, Sigmund. What's going on there?
Well, I did go screen by screen as I do to try and find anything noticeable. No noticeable changes right now. No insight in Developer Beta 2. I think we can expect that probably July time, end of July, early August maybe. Of course, insight we've learned this past week, powered by machine learning. So we, I think, originally thought, because it was Apple Original only, that this was something that was being fed information. This is actually working via machine learning, which is interesting because I think that's a different direction to what, for example, Amazon do with Prime Video and X-Ray, mainly because they also own IMDb, right? So they have a massive database already to go on.
I was surprised to hear that it's powered by machine learning. I think the music side of things makes sense because Apple owns Shazam, and so they kind of have a starting place there to start identifying songs. But in terms of identifying actors and their characters, I was like you. I thought this would be hand-coded by, someone at Apple TV Plus who went through and just added the time codes for each person. The fact that this is both powered by machine learning and limited to Apple Originals makes me wonder if maybe it's something that they're wanting to do in a limited scope just to see how it goes and, make sure that they're ready and capable to handle the scope that they're taking on. And then maybe eventually they could allow it to go to store content, and then maybe eventually to Apple TV channels and other sources that use the Apple native player. So I'm hopeful that this means we'll see it come to more content. I don't know if there's any sort of licensing or deals that have to work out that way for that to be possible as well. But the fact that this is powered by machine learning, and if it works as well as it looks like it does in the demo, I think that's very exciting and is good for the future of that feature.
I also think, at least in the US only, alongside Apple Originals on Apple TV Plus, we get a plethora of movies that come each month from a wide range of different studios. Maybe as part of this Apple TV Plus, I know they say Apple Originals only, but maybe that is where we see the introduction to third-party content, where Insight works with those films that are made available for a short period of time. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now, to note on the developer side, Felipe Esposito at 9to5Mac reports that Apple has increased the limit of app and game sizes in the latest tvOS and iOS 18 betas from 2GB to 4GB. The limit for on-demand resources downloaded after an app's initial installation has been raised from 40GB to 70GB. However, Apple's release notes do not indicate whether the 500KB limit on permanent app storage in tvOS has been raised. But I would imagine, Devon, that this is a good indication as to where we may be going with the future. I mean, I'm keeping my fingers and toes crossed as I say that. More hope maybe than anything. But what do you think?
Yeah, this is definitely a great development. I think it's just an acknowledgement on Apple's part that apps and games are getting more and more intensive in terms of the storage that they need. And so upping those capabilities is great. And hopefully that means that apps will be able to have more permanent storage on tvOS soon, which of course would open up lots of different categories on the tvOS App Store that just currently aren't viable today. Could also mean more possibilities of AAA console games coming to iPhone and hopefully eventually Apple TV, maybe with a bump in the processor there. So yeah, this is only good. And I think upping these limits is a great move on Apple's part. And interesting, it's coming in beta 2, which means there could be more changes to come. So we'll be keeping an eye out. Also this past week, tvOS 17.6 beta launched alongside iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. And with those updates came some interesting news about catch-up and key plays, features that we spoke about last week after you, Sigmund, found those new options in the developer beta for tvOS 18. They're also showing up in the beta for 17.6. For now, they're MLS Season Pass exclusive, so those clips will be limited to MLS Season Pass games and won't be available for other sports right now. But they will be heading to other TV platforms. So the Apple TV app on Roku and other platforms like that will be getting these features as well. This won't be an Apple TV or even an Apple platform exclusive, which is very cool. Maybe this is a little bit of a theme of this segment, Sigmund. These highlights are generated by machine learning. So someone's not having to manually clip out the goals and saves and all of that from these games. There's actually a machine learning model that's pulling those out and making those available, which is, again, just very cool to see this application of machine learning in a way that is very much something that people will be using.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this feature. Not only the machine learning part, which I think is going to be interesting to see if machine learning can also dig out some of the funny moments that we see in sports that end up becoming like meme worthy or highlight worthy. So that'll be interesting. However, I do have a little bit of a frustration. There's still no sports tab outside of the US, and there seems to be no apparent efforts to bring it to the TV app in other regions. Maybe someone forgot over at Apple. Hopefully it does come at some point, because we are missing so much, especially in the UK, at least from my experience. I'm sure everyone in other regions outside the US are complaining of the same thing. The Apple Sports app, however, that has been relegated to obscurity for me due to the lack of European Championship and Copa America international football integration. Both tournaments ongoing at the moment, and one of them, believe it or not, has a Lionel Messi playing for Argentina. Yes, the face of MLS and Apple. We've had 2 documentaries on that star, and yet no integration for a competition that he's currently involved in. When it comes to the European Championships, at one stage in the tournament, there were 3 games a day, so that's a whole month of everyday usage trend thrown out due to Apple's services division still very much prioritizing US audiences, and that continues to be a major disappointment really across the TV apps, sports, and I think we may have the crosswords in Apple News now. I'm not sure because I use the US version for these reasons, right? This is why I use the US version of these services. Of course, we talked about the films not being available outside of the US, in addition to Apple Originals on Apple TV+. Again, kind of going back to sports, European Championship group stage games peaked at 10.4 million viewers in the UK alone for a single 90-minute game, the highest peak audience of any opening to a major football tournament in a decade. In 2020, which was the last time that this tournament took place, it attracted a live average audience for the final of 328 million people, with live average match audience at 100 million plus globally. So that's a lot of eyeballs, that's a lot of potential users for the sports app, and literally just a few months after its introduction, it feels like it's been forgotten, at least outside of the US sports, and kind of blows me away a little bit.
Yeah, it really is wild that these tournaments aren't supported. Of course, we don't know if there's some kind of technological barrier there or some kind of licensing barrier, but regardless, it's definitely a huge miss on Apple Sports not to have these things in there. There's lots of sports fans all around the world who love to keep up with their football, and if I were someone who were trying to keep up with these tournaments and couldn't do so in the Apple Sports app, that'd be an immediate turnoff for me too. So hopefully we'll see more of these international tournaments added over time, but yeah, it is an unfortunate miss here.
Now, something that is coming to Europe this month, as well as China mainland, Hong Kong, Japan, and Singapore this week, is the rollout for Apple Vision Pro. Last week, we spoke about the rumor from The Information that Apple is focusing on development of a cheaper Vision OS device over a second-generation Apple Vision Pro. Now, in the latest edition of his Power On newsletter, Mark Gurman gave us more details about the device, including that it has a narrower field of view than Vision Pro and might rely on a tethered iPhone or Mac for processing, aiming for release at the end of 2025, still committed to the high-end headset market with plans for a lighter, more comfortable second-generation Vision Pro featuring upgraded processors and cameras slated for the end of 2026 at the earliest. Now, just very quickly, Devon, on the side of comfort, I did try the solo loop this past week again and immediately went back to the double loop or whatever it's called. I had a big mark on my head. I think I still have it actually a couple of days after. Didn't quite work for me. So slimmer, more comfy in a few years. I'm happy about that. I think this is the platform that I am most excited for when it comes to Apple and what they're doing and how they're innovating in this space and what's to come. It's a platform with a lot of promise.
Yeah, I think the detail that sticks out most to me, the one that's been talked about quite a bit this week, is the possibility that the Apple Vision, or whatever the more affordable version is going to be called, could rely on an external device for processing. That's a really interesting development. And I think it goes back to something that we talked about when this news first came out about them switching priorities, is that they're starting to make breakthroughs, right? They're starting to make these decisions and really commit to how they're going to make this thing a product, possibly by the end of next year. It made me think about rumors that we heard about actually the development of Apple Vision Pro, how Apple came up with this wireless standard to have a base station that would actually be streaming some of the processing and content over to Apple Vision Pro to keep it lighter and less heavy and maybe not having to have an external battery pack. Now, of course, they ended up not going with that design, but it sounds like they could be returning to some version of that strategy to make a cheaper and lighter Apple Vision product. And I think that's really cool. I do wonder what sort of limitations relying on an A-series chip would bring. If they're relying on the iPhone for processing, are they going to have weaker pass-through? Is it possibly going to be VR only? Kind of like the days back when people would put their phones in those little cardboard sleeves and put them on their face and use them as like a fake VR type setup. Or maybe they could do less immersive experiences. Mark Gurman talks about how the field of view is going to be smaller. Maybe that could help with processing. Maybe you don't have the immersive back behind you, but it's just in front of you. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of compromises they have to make there. But I think offloading some of that processing will definitely help with cost and make it available to more people. And to me, what this really points to is setting the stage for future AR glasses, which of course is like the end point of all of these form factors. So they won't have room for an onboard processor and a big battery to power a very intensive processor. So they're going to have to rely on probably the phone, much like the Apple Watch did in its early days. So yeah, this is really interesting and I'm excited to see where they go with it, but I think this is a positive development and a step in the right direction. What do you think?
So we spoke about the decision to have a tethered battery and that the shape of it felt like it was setting an expectation for Vision Pro to be a tethered device at some point in the future. So maybe the Vision Pro ends up being a device that is purely working on pass-through and the OS on that side of things, but the actual processing for programs and games and this kind of thing comes from your iPhone or an external device, which looks like the direction that they are going in. And I think that was quite telling with the fact that when Apple Vision Pro was ready to release, the big game Death Stranding wasn't able to play on it. We talked about that last week. So I'd be interested to know if there is a switch up in terms of, well, if we're only going to release Apple Vision Pro once every, 3-4 years, right, at the earliest, that maybe it needs to rely more on devices within the Apple ecosystem that can connect to it, right? So that it's not kind of lost to time quicker than we can really distribute the hardware. That I think is interesting, and it'll be interesting to see what actually comes to fruition in terms of, the direction that this product goes. 2026 and 2027 feels like a fair time to upgrade. The original hardware will be displayed somewhere in my house when the time does come to upgrade. And it sounds crazy because of how expensive this hardware is, but I'm really excited for whatever does come next. Even this supposed more budget option compared to the Pro. I'm just really excited for the platform in general. As I open this up, I think it's the most exciting platform that Apple have. It's the most innovative. It's bringing something fresh, something new, even to, a segment of the market that had already been largely adopted by competitors who have now copied a lot of the ideas that came from Vision OS in quick time. It excites me a lot. A lot more than our next point of topic, which is the Digital Markets Act. And we've got some updates for you.
Yes, lots going on in the world of the Digital Markets Act. Shout out to our very own John Voorhees, who has been staying on top of this at Mac Stories, doing great reporting there. He's been reporting on all of this, but we wanted to share it with our listeners as well. Late last week, Apple revealed that due to what the company refers to as regulatory uncertainties brought about by the Digital Markets Act, Apple Intelligence, iPhone mirroring to the Mac, and SharePlay screen sharing enhancements will not be coming to users in the EU anytime this year. The company went on to say, specifically, we are concerned that the interoperability requirements of the DMA could force us to compromise the integrity of our products in ways that risk user privacy and data security. We are committed to collaborating with the European Commission in an attempt to find a solution that will enable us to deliver these features to our EU customers without compromising their safety. So that's update one, Sigmund. We've got a couple more before we get into our discussion. On Monday, the European Commission officially notified Apple that it has found the company in violation of the Digital Market Act, specifically its anti-steering provisions, based on a preliminary investigation. The EC claims that no version of Apple's business terms allowed developers to freely steer their customers to alternate payment methods and offers. They say that Apple's link-out method for sending users to the developer's website is too restrictive. They say that Apple's fees for developers go beyond the scope of customer acquisition via the App Store. They've given Apple an opportunity to respond to those findings in writing, with a final decision due by March 25th of next year. So we've got some time for these things to be worked out. The European Commission has also opened a separate investigation into whether Apple's core technology fee, process for installing an alternative app marketplace, and requirements for creating an alternative app marketplace are compliant with the DMA, and they continue to investigate the company's notarization process for apps and app marketplaces. So when Apple announced their DMA compliance plans, we broke down all of these different things that they were doing, these changes they were making in the EU. Now we're going back through the things that the EU is coming back to them on and saying, we're not sure that these things comply. These lists sound very similar to me, Sigmund, and there's a lot of things that the European Commission has questions, at least, for Apple on, and isn't sure if these comply with the DMA, and is actually saying, at least preliminarily, that some of them definitely do not. So what do you think about all this?
I think that the Digital Markets Act is very, very complicated because it is so multifaceted. And so I've seen discussions, I've been involved in a few as well this week and giving my opinion on it. And I think it's complicated for that reason, right? Because I think we all agree that there should be fairer terms for developers on Apple's platforms. But the current implementation of the DMA is foggy, and it has me a little bit concerned, right? In the sense that, first off, I don't think it is as defined as it needs to be. It is something that was introduced in 2022, is something that feels like it's ever evolving. So as Apple do their best, in my opinion, to follow those rules kind of tweak and change, and there's this element of the spirit of the DMA as opposed to something that's clearly defined. So based on the spirit, the goalposts can change a little bit, to use a sports analogy. Now, as much as I'm not battling for big tech and trillion-dollar corporations, my personal politics, which will remain personal to me, mean I'm also not battling for big government. And I have to be that way in the sense of I've had very little faith in big government on things that really affect people on a day-to-day basis. And when it comes to digital markets, I probably have little faith in comparison to those. There's a reason for that. We saw in the US, for example, when that whole Facebook hearing happened, how out of touch with the actual technology the people in Congress were really aware of, right? It became a bit of a joke, to be quite honest with you. And we looked back on it as such. The DMA is focused on preventing the EC's own definition of gatekeepers from unfairly favouring their own services and promoting interoperability. And the interoperability item is actually the most concerning to me. We've talked about the threat to Apple customers and their user experience and, of course, personal data. And there are 3 key reasons I think Apple can't launch certain services in Europe simultaneously with other regions. The first being if Apple Intelligence were to prioritize Apple services like Apple Music or Apple Maps in searches or recommendations, the DMA would apply, right? If iPhone mirroring is only native to Apple devices, that violates the DMI's interoperability requirements. Similarly, SharePlay screen sharing will require an Apple device on both ends, meaning it also violates the DMA's interoperability requirements. And as far as Apple Intelligence goes, how Apple deal with Siri now being equipped with a semantic indexing feature will be interesting. It promises a semantic understanding of its users' intentions and allows Siri to organize a semantic index library based on the user's photos, calendars, files, emails, and more. We saw that with the example that was given in terms of finding out when your mother's flight arrives, just based on the information that is found through this semantic indexing. My understanding is that based on the DMA, this index will need to be opened up to third parties, and that has me feeling very uneasy. Apple continuously promote the idea that privacy is a human right. I think they're one of the only companies really being that heavy on that, because companies mainly make money from the data that they can collect. I guess my question is, if the interoperability requirements are as such, and by creating something new and innovating in the space, you have to make the feature available to all players in your market, effectively making it a free open standard, doesn't that do the opposite of encouraging competition and innovation in the space? If your innovations and R&D give you no competitive advantage, what effect does that then have on future employment when the investment in people doesn't give a distinct advantage over competitors? Obviously, this is an Apple TV podcast, and so I want to kind of pitch my argument from an Apple TV perspective. Let's imagine Apple TV one day gets so popular that it's deemed a problematic platform. What are the chances that any of our wishes that we've had throughout the years on this podcast actually come to fruition if those features also have to become open standards, right? So suddenly they have to be able to work for everyone. How long is that development process going to take? We're likely not to see certain features ever come. Now, of course, Apple TV isn't part of this yet, but it could be. The last thing I'll say, and thank you for kind of giving me this time, Devon, is I'd also ask what percentage of the proposed fines actually go to the developer community and to the industry as a whole, especially in developing EU member countries. And if there has been a pledge reflecting that, or does it all just kind of disappear and get funneled into legal costs and other EU objectives? I think those questions are all valid. I'm not claiming to be an expert at all. Of course, a lot of it comes from emotion. A lot of it comes from what I want as an Apple user, what I come to expect as an Apple user, and how I feel some of that is being attacked. Again, not batting for Apple, as, you know, they have a legal team. They have good PR. They don't need me. But from my personal perspective, as someone that has got everyone in my family to adopt Apple products, including those in Vienna, Austria, who are now part of these rulings and already seeing the effects of these changes, it does have me concerned. So now that I've had my piece, I'm going to shut up, Devon. What are your thoughts on what I had to say, and of course your thoughts on the DMA?
I think you bring up some good points and questions about the implications. As far as the money goes, I don't really have a horse in that race or have super feelings on that. You know, Apple's, fighting this fight on a global scale. They know the financial possibilities of how that could turn out for them. And as a huge company with the amount of money they have, they know what the bets they're taking. And so I think that in terms of the fines and even the business terms that the EC might be requiring Apple to change up, I think all of that will kind of settle itself. And to me, that's not as important as the user experience part of it and the implications there. And as you said, the implications for future innovation and the limitations that could be set there. And to me, I think you really got to the heart of it. It's the interoperability question and exactly how those rules apply. That's the one that needs to be answered concerning especially these specific features that Apple has said are not going to be coming this year. The problem there, of course, is that Apple and the European Commission are interpreting the law differently in terms of what is and isn't allowed. And the nice thing, though, is that because it's open to interpretation, the rules can actually be maybe more lax than they might seem on paper. That's what we saw when it came to web apps on iOS. Apple initially pulled those from the operating system in the EU, thinking they broke DMA interoperability rules, and then the EC came back and said, no, those are okay, and so they got put back in, and EU users can have web apps on their home screens now, which is great. But I'm wondering if that's what the result is going to be here, where Apple is saying, we don't know about these features, we don't know if they're going to pass the DMA, and then the EC can come back and say, you know what, these are fine, go ahead and put them in, we're not going to fine you for putting these in. Is that an ideal process? No. And it leads to a lot of, confusion and just dis-ease for users. And that's really my concern, is these people in the EU right now don't know what features are coming to their phones this year because Apple has said they're not coming, and who knows if that'll actually turn out to be true or not. So I think the question is in those interpretations. Apple tends to take the interpretation, of course, that best fits their priorities and what they want to do. And so in terms of these features, they've interpreted it to mean that they can't release them, and they're making that very public in order, I think, to probably get a reaction.
Sure.
But the EC can come back and interpret it a different way, and hopefully those things will settle out. And my hope would be that over time, this is a very new law. It's something that's still being, figured out on the fly as they're implementing it and exactly what it all means. Hopefully we'll come up with some kind of baseline for what those interoperability standards really are in practice, if they differ in any way from the way it's written on the paper, so that Apple won't have to come to the EC every summer and say, here's what we announced, what can we release in your region, right? Hopefully Apple can kind of implement those standards into their development once they're sort of clarified, and we won't have this question anymore. I will say, on a larger note, I am not a DMA stan. I don't think the DMA is a perfect law by any means, if there is a perfect law, honestly. The implementation is tricky because, again, that language can be interpreted in different ways. The enforcement body doesn't always offer clarity on what exactly they're looking for. It's kind of a do your best, and then if you get it wrong, we'll let you know type process, which, I understand that's just how things are done, and, you have to respect all the different regions of the world and how they do things. At the same time, I wonder if things were clarified ahead of time, if we could avoid some of this drama. I will say, though, something did need to happen when it comes to Apple and the App Store, disallowing certain categories on the App Store, just not allowing them to exist at all, not allowing alternative payment methods, not allowing developers to have any say in the split in their revenue between Apple and themselves. I think all of those things that the DMA tried to address needed to be addressed, and Apple likely wasn't ever going to do it on its own without some kind of outside pressure. And I guess for whatever reason, the threat of the DMA even wasn't enough to make any changes. The DMA had to actually be implemented and enforced. So if Apple wasn't going to make those changes, then it's the DMA and other legislation around the world. That's what we have now. So unfortunately, I feel like the situation could have been avoided, and it wasn't. So here we are, and it's going to turn out worse for, I think, everyone involved because Apple didn't make those changes on their own. But that's the situation that we're in. So the power struggles will continue. Apple will continue to push back and have their interpretations. The EC will continue to push back and have their interpretations. Both parties seem committed to this fight, so I think it's going to take some time. But I do believe things will settle eventually. We'll find a baseline for the interpretation. There might be little flare-ups here and there where someone pushes back every once in a while, but I do think there will be some kind of equilibrium here. Apple wants to be in the European Union. Obviously, they have to adhere to the laws there, and as much as they might push back and see how far they can get, eventually I think they're going to figure out what that line is and, stay just on this side of it so that they don't end up getting those fees and having these conversations anymore. So again, I'm not trying to say one side or the other is perfect in all of this. I think that there's plenty of decisions that could have been made differently on either side, but the reality of the situation that we're in is Apple's going to have to contend with the DMA. The EC is going to interpret it the way that they do, and Apple's going to adjust to it and then push the boundary as far as they can within those interpretations. And that's where we're at. Mainly, I just feel bad for users in the EU who, they did get alternative app marketplaces, so that was a big win, something that hopefully, if that's something they were looking for, they get to enjoy, but at the same time, now they've got questions about these new features that they thought were coming to their devices and now may or may not be. So I hope that things get worked out for their sake, and that we hear less and less of these stories as things get settled after this first big round of really figuring out what the DMA is going to look like.
Kind of going into the future, Devon, I think the thing that, no matter what kind of side of the argument you're on, the thing that we want is we want to see both parties go in with good intentions, right? And I got to say, one thing that kind of rubbed me up the wrong way this week was the EC's statement on potential fines. I think they went to the press at the end of last week to talk about fines are incoming and this kind of thing. And then when they brought out their statement with regard to preliminary findings of Apple and opening up further investigation about non-compliance, one thing that they led with was Apple's new slogan should be, and it was put in quotation marks, act different, obviously playing off of the think different phase. And one criticism I would have is for, a serious subject matter as this, which obviously could have potential effects on security of people's information, especially, recently the National Health Service was attacked by Russia over here in the UK. And so I haven't been able to go to my local hospital for blood tests, and a lot of my results have been wiped off of the system. This kind of thing, right, is going on, right? And so I think they need to calm down on the language that's being used on both sides. But I kind of saw this and I just thought, are you really entering into this debate with good intentions? Like, I will always talk to someone or listen to someone that has differing opinions to me, provided they enter with good intentions, right? To maybe learn something from my side and not just kind of be the bearer of, all of the facts, so to speak. And as I say, Apple's new slogan should be act different is, I feel like, 2 steps away from the really bad Windows PC ads that we've seen recently and the other Samsung Apple attack ads, which we've been critical of in the past. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave things.
I will say that slogan pitch is a little bit cringe for sure. I'd say both Apple and the EC are going for press wins here, trying to kind of sway the public. And, I guess that's just a part of the story. You got to get people behind you for your support, but it's also an unfortunate side effect of this whole thing. In terms of intentions, as you said, the thing I'll leave it on is I do actually take both parties in the situation at their face value, that the EC really is fighting for its citizens. Apple really is fighting for its customers, especially when it comes to security and privacy. I do think that's their biggest priority in all of this. And so I hope that those two good intentions can come together and yield the best results for everybody. And we'll just have to wait and see how it all goes. But I've enjoyed this discussion with you about the DMA segment. I think we kept it nice and civil and both got to share our points of view, and hopefully our listeners enjoyed it.
Well, no doubt we'll be talking about the DMA again in the future. Hopefully we'll give it a few months. But now it's time to lighten things up a little bit. Did you see the return of the Pill Dude earlier this week?
Pill Dude? He's back?
He is. If you don't know what we're talking about, we are talking about the wide-mouthed kind of mascot of the long-forgotten speaker, Beats Pill. We've not seen it in a while.
Yeah, I honestly forgot about Pill Dude until Pill Dude came back this week. And I loved the little clip that Apple put out just announcing that, oh, by the way, there's a new Beats Pill that's going to be released on June 25th, which just so happens to be the day that we're recording this episode, Sigmund.
Yeah, we're recording the episode early, so there have been no details released at the time in which we are recording. Of course, they will be out there by the time this episode releases. But what we do know is that the new Beats pill is going to launch in stores this week. It's going to come in red, black, and gold, which is very, very cool, with an RRP of $149. It's going to launch in stores this week. So this isn't a pre-order. It's out there, ready. I'm guessing US only for the time being. Now, I've been on the search for a mobile, like AirPlay speaker, preferably with Siri activation. There is a battery-powered setup that you can have for the HomePod Mini, and that might be the way I still go. But I'll let you know which way it goes next week, when we can talk about it more in detail.
In other news, SwitchBot has unveiled their new universal remote, capable of controlling smart lights, air conditioners, and TVs through a combination of infrared, Bluetooth, and in combination with a hub, Matter. The device features a 2.4-inch LCD display, a touch wheel, 4 configurable shortcut buttons, and up to 150 days of battery life. Support for controlling Apple TV is said to be coming in a future software update. Of course, we always say never buy a product on the promise of a future update, but hopefully we'll see it able to control the Apple TV soon, because that would be a great addition to this universal remote that really feels like they're trying to get as many domains as possible into this one little device.
I was initially really excited about this, and then I remembered that pretty much every universal remote that's ever existed in my time with them has never had a way of being able to invoke Apple's Assistant. The way to do that is a long-time wish of ours, a Siri relay feature that could also come to programming remotes in remotes and devices under settings on Apple TV. So it's very cool that you can control the lighting and everything else. There are remotes that do that already out there. Of course, the famous one was the Harmony remote from Logitech. That's long gone now, and you can still pick them up secondhand, but there's no real support there anymore. There's another remote that I know like home theater enthusiasts like, called the Baton, which again does all of this but doesn't do Siri. I will say that my history has been the Logitech remote, and I've been looking for something that can replace that. What I have been doing is I've just been piping everything through Home Assistant, and the things you can do through Home Assistant are incredible. This is going to be very, very cool for people that don't want to tweak that much. One thing I will say with these all-in-one remotes, one issue I had many, many years ago, we're going back, and you'll know how far back in a minute. Infrared channels can mix up with other devices, and I had a problem where I used to use an old VHS Handycam for one of my setups, and of course photography lights. That used to kind of turn them on and off when I was just trying to control the television. So that's something that happened in the past. Of course, technology's moved on from there. And I think everyone's kind of simplifying their setups now when it comes to film making as opposed to film viewing. And the next progression to that is something that we've been waiting for a long, long time. It's finally been released after its announcement during the iPad event just a couple of months ago now. That is Final Cut Pro 2 for the iPad and Final Cut Camera for the iPhone, now available on the App Store, Devon.
That's right. Final Cut Pro 2 for iPad includes live multicam, which allows users to record multiple streams of iPhone video using the new Final Cut Camera app. This was an amazing demo during the iPad event, something that we were really excited to see and get our hands on. And now it's available for everyone to use. Of course, Final Cut Pro 2 for the iPad is a subscription app, but the Final Cut Camera for iPhone is available to download for free, and you can also just use it as an independent camera with all the adjustable settings as well, which is very cool. The update for iPad also includes support for creating and editing projects on external storage, camera setting controls like ISO and shutter speed, and new color grading presets, backgrounds, soundtracks, title styles, and more. Final Cut Pro for Mac 10.8 was also released. It comes with new organizational tools, enhanced light and color, and smooth slow-mo. When all this was announced, Sigmund, we mentioned the fact that Final Cut Camera is not coming to Final Cut Pro for the Mac, at least for now. So it's an iPad exclusive feature. Interesting to see the breakdown of features between the iPad and Mac versions. But I think this addition of editing projects on external storage for the iPad is going to be huge for a lot of filmmakers. Moving from creating to gaming, we've got a couple bits of gaming news. A selection of Mac game titles are on sale for a limited time on the App Store, including Valheim for $9.99, Death Stranding Director's Cut for $19.99, and Resident Evil Village for $15.99 and more. It's quite a long list. We'll link to it in the show notes. Might be able to pick up a good deal there, but it is for a limited time. On the iPhone and iPad side of things, retro game service AntStream will be the first game streaming service available on the App Store when it launches this Thursday for iPhone and iPad. The catalog includes over 1,300 games from the Atari 2600, Commodore 64, Super Nintendo, Mega Drive, PlayStation 1, and arcade classics. AntStream games include local co-op, weekly tournaments, hundreds of challenges, a global leaderboard, and cloud saving for playing on multiple devices. A special launch price of $3.99 per month or $29.99 per year will be on offer for a limited time before the service returns to its usual price of $4.99 a month or $39.99 a year. So a good deal to get on there, but also just really exciting to see a game streaming service coming to the iOS and iPadOS App Store after that category was allowed recently.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because I'm someone that loves weekly tournaments and challenges and score chasing. I'm very competitive on that point of view. And I'm guessing because these games are, limited in terms of the data that they use, that things should work fine when it comes to streaming. But it'll be interesting to see how the two elements play hand in hand. Looking forward to signing up to this and checking it out later this week. Now, when it comes to VR, Airlight VR, an open source tool for streaming open VR games from Steam on a PC over Wi-Fi, is now available for free on the App Store for Apple Vision Pro. It supports hand gesture controls, dual controllers such as Joy-Cons, and Lighthouse base station setups for input. I think this kind of innovation could push Apple to having inputs and controllers for Apple Vision Pro under certain set circumstances, right? We've seen the trackpad and now mouse support is coming with Vision OS 2 in September. But there is something about a physical input and feeling, a trigger or feeling some kind of feedback based on the games that you are playing and are trying to immerse yourself in, that is missing right now in the Vision Pro experience.
Yeah, I'm curious how these Joy-Con inputs are going to work out. Of course, that's not nearly as precise as something like a VR controller with dual hand support, but maybe it's a good stopgap in between. I feel like Apple does have to eventually add support for, if not their own controller in this space, other controllers in this space, to be able to play more intense and precise VR games on Apple Vision Pro. So, yeah, I think that's coming. I think it's inevitable. It's just not quite there yet. I don't know if it'll be a first-party thing or a third-party thing, but I do think it's coming before too long. And apps like this just show why it is going to be so needed. There's a new update for Supercut for Apple Vision Pro. Version 1.2 was released this week by developer Christian Privatelli with the inclusion of an immersive cinema environment for Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. So if you're someone who watches a lot of Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, especially using Supercut on Apple Vision Pro, now you can have your own immersive theater environment. I have to say, Sigmund, I love the addition of third-party theater environments on Apple Vision Pro that we're seeing. It's really great with Apple's theater environment. It's awesome, but it's limited to the TV app, right? You can only watch titles from the TV app. So now having the ability to watch titles from other sources in a theater is great as well.
I agree. The thing that I would say is there are a lot of theaters on Apple Vision Pro now from different apps, right? And I'm seeing myself kind of vie towards wanting to watch films in like really cool environments instead that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. But there you go. That's just me. Now, in terms of Apple Vision Pro and services that don't need third-party apps and have delivered an app specific for the platform, Paramount Plus is an app that I do love on Apple Vision Pro, but it's getting pricier once again. We're hearing this time and time again. It'll be raising its prices for new customers and some existing customers starting August 8th, with Paramount Plus with Showtime costing $1 more at $12.99 per month, and Paramount Plus Essential costing $2 more at $7.99 per month. Annual rates are not changing, nor is the Essential rate for existing subscribers, but all current Paramount Plus with Showtime subscribers will be moved to the new higher price starting September 20th. Now, this news follows on from the news that we gave last week on the potential sale of Paramount CBS falling through at, I think, the very, very last hurdle. Skydance were in the offing, and I think they're still searching for a buyer, but as they scramble, they are trying to claw some money back. I think there was something like a $500 million investment that they're trying to claw back through the service and through subscribers.
I think it's easy to see the connection between that merger falling through and these price increases. They're in it for the long haul now. They're going to be owning Paramount Plus for some time, investing money in it, and they need to recoup some of that. You know, we see these streaming price increases and we wonder how many people are going to unsubscribe versus how many people are just going to keep paying, or how many people might jump down from that higher tier to the ad-supported tier, which is actually a good thing financially for the company for someone to do. So, I mean, there's a lot of calculus that goes into it, but at the end of the day, you know, these price increases, they're just a part of the streaming business, and especially when a company's struggling the way that Paramount is, you know, they got to find a way to get those streaming services to profitability, or at least as close as they can get. I think that's what this move is. And, you know, I like Paramount Plus. I'm a supporter. I'm a subscriber. I will say one secret to avoiding some of these price increases is just to complicate your subscription through some kind of third party. I pay for my subscription through Walmart Plus. I get the base free, and then I have an add-on for the Showtime edition. And who knows if I'm going to get a price increase or not. I haven't heard, but that's one way to maybe slow some of these things down personally a little bit if you have that option. But regardless, I'm sticking with it, and I hope it works out for them. I mean, I'm rooting for the company to succeed in whatever way that looks like. And if this is a step towards it, then that's just a part of it.
I mean, another tip that I have is around Black Friday time, when all of the deals come for the yearly subscriptions, even if they're only for the ad subscriptions. Whilst the TV app and your listings never change, you can change the account in the app that you link to the TV app, so you don't lose any of your history, but you're able to kind of jump on that new customer deal. So that's something I do each and every year. Cheeky, but it's worth it.
Well, we talked about another streaming service segment. Let's get back to Apple TV Plus with this week's trailers. This week saw the final trailer for upcoming Apple original film Fly Me to the Moon. Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum star as a marketing maven and a by-the-book launch director who team up for a mission set against the high-stakes backdrop of NASA's historic Apollo 11 moon landing.
The whole world will be watching. We can't afford to lose to the Russians. We need to shoot the backup version of the moon landing.
You mean to fake it? No one can ever know what we're doing.
I cannot accept that.
They will shoot you.
What is my budget?
Oh, boy.
I know a lot more about the moon than I know about you.
My Armstrong is a whiny little witch we have to recast.
Like I said, Sigmund, this is the final trailer. This film is coming so soon. I can't believe it's already almost here in theaters. What do you think about this last glimpse that we're getting at the film before it releases?
Well, compared to the debut trailer, there's a lot more action here, a few explosions. I think we get a better idea of the relationship between all parties involved and the complications that arise. What I also kind of love about this is that it came at the perfect time, really, because it coincided with early previews hosted by Sony and Apple in LA this past week, which has, of course, led to high praise and more hype towards this film from those that were in attendance. Now, I've booked my tickets already, and you may be surprised as to when I'm able to see Fly Me to the Moon, because I will be checking out Fly Me to the Moon on July 6th in London. This is because the film is actually hitting theatres 1 week early as part of a limited run in certain territories before it makes its wide theatrical release on July 12th. Of course, no date yet for when Fly Me to the Moon will come to Apple TV+, but I'm guessing September, October time is probably what we have come to expect, at least coming to the TV app via PVOD before its Apple TV Plus run. So excited about this one, but that wasn't the only trailer that we got this week, because we got our first look at Yo Gabba Gabba Land, where we step inside a fantastic land of fun and imagination with Cammy Cam and her beloved friends through music and magic, and they learn about their world and unlock limitless wonder in this upcoming Kids and Family series. It's coming August 9th, features a host of guest appearances. One thing I love about this is the cast and crew listings, which we actually see across all of the kids and family shows in the TV app, where rather than the picture of the actor, we get the picture of the character. I love it every time this happens. It happens with the Peanuts shows and original films. I think the first time I noticed it was the Helpsters, but this is great because we get to look at the TV app, Devon, and get to pick the character that I think we most identify with when it comes to character design. So, looking at the TV app listing, what's your character?
Oh man, I could stare at this listing all day. It really is incredible. I love these. I'm going to have to go with my favorite being Tootie, played by Aaron Pierce. Tootie looks like a mix between a wolf and maybe a dragon. I don't know, but I love the costume. Tootie looks like a lot of fun. I've never seen Yo Gabba Gabba. I'm not familiar with the actual characters' personalities and backstories, but just based on looks, I'm going to have to go with Tootie. What about you?
I'm going to go with Muno. One-eyed, two-toothed monster. I love it. The design is interesting, to say the least. Yo Gabba Gabba Land is coming August 9th. You having a young child, is this a little too early at this point to introduce Yo Gabba Gabba Land?
I think not. You know, we're trying to limit screen time, as you always do, but just like any of us, Noah loves his screens. We actually showed him a little bit of Camp Snoopy a little while back, and he loved the animation there. So, yeah, I think Yo Gabba Gabba Land is probably going to be right up his alley in small doses, as you do. Moving to Apple Original news, this week, Apple announced a new Apple Original podcast called My Devo. It's actually coming this Monday, July 1st. It follows host Maria Garcia's journey back to her roots, with Mexican singer-songwriter Juan Gabriel's legacy as her guide. If you recognize the name Maria Garcia, it's because she won the Apple Podcast 2021 Newcomer of the Year Award for Anything for Selena. Very cool to see her teaming back up with Apple here. It's the first Apple Original podcast released in both English and Spanish, so you'll get to be able to pick which language you want to listen in. It's also the first Apple Original podcast to be part of an Apple TV Plus connected subscription. This was a feature that came out last year with iOS 17, where you'll be able to connect certain subscriptions that you pay for into the podcast app. And now they're doing it with Apple TV Plus as well. All 8 episodes of the series will be available Monday for subscribers, whereas for everyone else, you'll get the first 2 episodes on Monday with new episodes released weekly. So if you want to listen to it all, you're going to have to be an Apple TV Plus subscriber. The trailer is available now. We'll link it in the show notes and look forward to Monday when we can listen to My Devo on Apple Podcasts.
In development, Jennifer Lawrence will return to theatres and eventually Apple TV Plus as both the star and producer of upcoming Apple Studios and A24 feature film The Wives. It's from writers Michael Breslin and Patrick Foley, as the film is described as a murder mystery in the vein of The Real Housewives. In returns, The Reluctant Traveller has been renewed for a third season that promises a truly global adventure after season 2 saw Eugene Levy travel through Europe. Levy said of the announcement, "I really appreciate what this show is trying to do for me, but to be a real season traveller, you need to have a strong sense of adventure and curiosity, and I'm ashamed to say over the past 2 seasons, I have developed neither. But I have to admit, I'm having a lot of fun putting in the effort, so the beat goes on, apparently." That is Eugene Levy in this series pretty much all over, isn't it?
It really is. I think this quote is the best marketing for the show you could possibly have. It really just encapsulates the whole just vibe of it. And I love it. I love The Reluctant Traveler. You know, it's pushing him beyond his boundaries. We're getting to see his reactions to things. And as much as he might come off as a little bit grumpy and reluctant in these quotes, he actually is very much a good sport when it comes time. So I'm glad to see this one continue, and we're going to be going more places with Eugene Levy soon. New 8-episode hospital drama series Crank Berlin is coming to Apple TV Plus in partnership with ZDF Neo. Haley Louise Jones stars as Dr. Parker, who is seeking a fresh start managing an emergency room in the big city after her private life implodes in Munich. When she tries to implement necessary reforms, Parker is confronted with resistance from the underpaid, ill-equipped, and chronically fatigued hospital staff, who only survive with an indispensable dose of black humor. But in the face of an increasingly merciless healthcare system, the battered team must put aside their differences and pull together to save lives. No release date for this one, but it is a cool announcement. A kind of new genre for Apple TV Plus. I guess the closest we ever got to this was 5 Days at Memorial, but hopefully this one is a little bit lighter than 5 Days at Memorial. Of course, hospital drama is just a hugely popular genre, so another great way to round out the offering of Apple TV Plus, and with a little bit of an international touch as well. Finally, rounding out the news, a supermajority of Apple Studios visual effects workers have signed authorization cards to unionize with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, with an official election filed for and expected within the next 2 months. With this decision, these workers join a growing trend of unionization in the VFX industry. Apple Studios VFX coordinator Valerie Wicks said of the news, "Apple is a wonderful place to work, so I participated partly to keep it that way and to make sure people of all job titles have had my same experience. But most of all, I participated for the greater goal of unionizing all of VFX across every studio. That's the dream, and we are now one step closer. I'm proud of Apple and proud of us." So we applaud this decision by VFX workers. Anything workers can do to continue to fight for better treatment and more fairness throughout the industry, we love to see it, and we wish them all the best with this election.
Yeah, I think this is a great start for an industry that has, in general, needed it. A lot more unionization. VFX artists treated really badly across the industry, really, up to this point. So this is a good move, and I'm really happy for this process to begin, because I've seen a number of friends actually being hit by the effects of a lack of unionization. So very, very cool to see. Now, this week, when it comes to Apple TV releases, we start with Apple Arcade releases and updates, starting with Warped Car Racers, Spatial added to the service. Really excited for that. Gibbon, Beyond the Trees Spatial, updated with Liberation Mode and game controller support, as well as daily runs. Bloons TD6 Plus, which continues to get update after update. I think we mention it every time. Its spatial version updated with a new hero named Rosilia, a new quest, and a new boss rush event. updates to a variety of games as part of a month-long event emphasising ways to play together. They include Crossy Road Castle, Crayola Adventures, What the Car, Mini Motorways and more, with a link to the full list of updates in the show notes. I've always enjoyed playing games together, not necessarily online, but couch co-op. So I'm hoping that there'll be some of that in there as well. But also announced this week is Cityscape's Sim Builder Spatial, which is coming July 3rd. This was announced alongside Warped Car Racers. The spatial element to Apple Arcade continues to grow. I am not a sim builder kind of guy, but it looks absolutely incredible when you bring the elements of that game away from the screen and into your space. So this might be the first kind of introduction of this genre of game for me personally. I'm guessing you're more of a Warped Car Racers kind of guy.
Oh, yeah. This gives me throwbacks to my Mario Kart days for sure, which honestly still active every once in a while. I'll pull out Mario Kart and play it, but it used to be something I did just constantly. So this really is like the culmination of that whole UI though, with you've got your race in the middle, but then outside of the race window, not blocking any of your view of the racetrack, you've got your item and your map. It's just really cool way to design this. And like you, I agree. I love just seeing the way each game adapts in its own unique way, because every take is just ever so slightly different, and it adds something to the game that you just can't get on any other platform, which is amazing to see, and great to see these spatial titles continue to come and continue to receive updates.
That's coming later in the week. Today sees, of course, the premiere of our highlight, Land of Women, alongside a new episode of Presumed Innocent, and the penultimate episode of Trying. Oh, no. We also see the finales for Acapulco and Dark Matter, which, my head. Honestly, after that last episode, I am completely bamboozled, shocked, fried. I loved that last episode. Cannot wait for that finale later today. Very, very exciting. On Friday, we have the streaming premiere of Apple Original Fancy Dance following its theatrical run. I think you've had a chance to see it now. We are, of course, going to discuss it next week to give everyone a chance to have seen it on Apple TV+. Alongside the premiere of Wondler, the long-awaited Skydance animation series. Really, really excited for that, and no doubt we'll be talking about that in an upcoming episode. And then on Friday night, we see Friday Night Baseball, with both games starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. They are Houston Astros at New York Mets and San Diego Padres at Boston Red Sox. Of course, Saturday and Sunday sees the return and the continuation of MLS Season Pass, which, of course, has seen some players kind of leave for their international commitments. But this past week saw a really, really fun moment. So in Atlanta United's 1-1 draw against St. Louis City SC over the weekend, the MOS ref, Philippe Dujic, took it upon himself to explain a VAR ruling of St. Louis's potential goal in the 39th minute. During his short time in the spotlight, Julik turned a standard procedure into a bit of a troll. You see, what happens is when a VAR, which is a video action replay, decision is made, in the MOS, they explain over the microphone, which I wish they would do over here in the UK, the reasoning for their ruling. He basically said on the microphone, after review, there was no offside offence, which Julik began, eliciting cheers and applause from the St. Louis crowd, only for Julik then to smirk, raise his palm to silence the home fans, and continue, however, prior to the goal, there was a foul committed by St. Louis. The final decision is direct free kick. So, a bit of a troll. One of those moments that you'll see on social media. Will machine learning pick that kind of thing up? And, you know, the moments that really kind of make the game what it is, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, very, very funny indeed. On Monday, as we previously mentioned, we see the premiere of My Devo with 8 episodes for Apple TV Plus subscribers and 2 for non-subscribers. Finally, some extras: The Land of Women, an inside look, alongside Camp Snoopy, Snoopy's Guide to Beagle Badges. Of course, last week saw the finale to The Big Cigar, the limited series about Black Panther Party co-founder Huey P. Newton, as he enlists an unlikely ally, Hollywood producer Bert Schneider, to elude an FBI manhunt and escape to Cuba. And before our spoiler recap, here is a little clip.
I want to transform society.
The founder of the Black Panther Party is wanted.
The FBI is after me.
They framed him.
Where am I supposed to go? You're the hotshot producer, man. Produce this.
All right, we're making a movie to get Huey out of the country. The Big Cigar. I love the Big Cigar, man.
I am willing to fight with you because I believe in you.
I won't let you down.
Executive produced by Janine Sherman-Baroy, Jim Hecht and Joshua Bierman, starring Andre Holland, Alessandro Nivola, Tiffany Boone, PJ Byrne, Mark Menchaca, Moses Ingram and others. Devon, we had a lot to say about this show as it premiered just a few weeks later, and we've already seen the finale, so 6 episodes, it goes very, very quickly. We've talked about this show throughout its casting, its production, and then its promotion. What are your takeaway thoughts on The Big Cigar? And did this true story turn out how you expected it to?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it unfortunately did fly under the radar in so many ways. I think in contrast to Franklin, which you talked about a little while back, another bio series, this one was actually too short. I think it could have been at least an episode or 2 longer. I think not only would that have benefited the story and the pacing, but it also would have just benefited the buzz around the series, giving people a little more time to get into it and talk about it, because I did really enjoy the show, and you know, with all the build up to it that we had, I think it did live up to our expectations. It just went by so fast. I mean, in a month, right? With 2 episode premiere and then 4 more episodes, it's gone. And unfortunately, that's just not enough time sometimes for a show to really get into the zeitgeist and get into people's conversations. I would have loved to have learned more about Newton's life and the earlier days of the Black Panther Party. We get very small glimpses of that in the first couple of episodes, and I actually found that really compelling. You know, as much as that didn't end up being his strategy in the long run, and, you know, it's also very, of course, controversial, but it also makes for good TV, right? The things that they were doing in the early days, the ways that they were trying to stand up for each other. And I think the impacts of those early days are very much seen later on in the show, but we don't necessarily always know exactly what's being referred back to because we don't get as much time with him in those early days. So it's very focused, obviously, on a specific time in his life when he was trying to escape the FBI and get to Cuba. And it does a great job of covering that whole era in very good detail. But I felt like the flashbacks and the setup and really getting to know him, we could have gotten more of. I also would have loved more of Huey P. Newton with his dad. I loved that relationship, and every scene we got between those two was great. But again, I just don't think we got enough of it. I will say it holds up both as a bio series and as a period piece. Of course, Huey P. Newton is a fascinating person to do a series on, someone who had a big impact on the world and also was just interesting as a personality, and to also just see kind of the spiral that he went on at a certain point under a lot of pressure from the FBI and really some tactics that they were using against his mental health in ways that unfortunately we saw play out in the series. I want to shout out Andre Holland because I think he did a really great job with this role, and there was a lot to it. The narration in particular, I shouted that out when we first talked about the show. I just think the way that he is able to communicate Huey's voice through that narration, looking back on the story, I think was really effective and really just sets the tone for the whole series. I particularly enjoyed the relationship between Huey and Gwen, played by Tiffany Boone. The show does a good job of showing that Huey didn't do this alone. He had several lieutenants, and particularly the women in the Black Panther Party, who kept it going in his absence when he was on the run. And the relationship between him and Glenn I thought was really special, and I appreciate the way they showed that. You know, they went through obviously some ups and downs with everything he was going through, not only with being on the run, but also his mental health. And so just seeing that relationship play out on screen I thought was really special. Again, repeat this, I just wish we'd seen more of it, right? More time here would have been wonderful. I think the character of Bert is probably the one I found most interesting personally, as far as someone that I could relate to in the story and I think really learn from. He's a well-meaning ally who isn't always as helpful as he intends to be, right? He comes in, he really wants to help, and again, we talked about in our highlight his commitment to the cause and the way he was willing to put his own body and safety on the line for it, which is great. At the same time, he does make some mistakes along the way, and you know, I think his impact on Huey's life can't be described as just straightforwardly positive, right? I think there's definitely some nuance there. And so I think personally for me, the big takeaway as far as just reflecting on the series and what I'm going to be thinking on going forward is really his example, what I can learn from his mistakes and his successes myself, and trying to be a force for positive change in the world. I think there's a lot there. Now, the good news is, again, spoilers for something that happened a long time ago, is that Bert and Huey were ultimately successful in getting Huey to safety, but also by then he'd been so beaten down by not only the manhunt for him, but also just all the tactics the FBI had used against him over time, and really just the psychological aspects of what they were doing to him, I think really just wore him down. So it's a victory in a sense, but it's also, I think, a bittersweet victory at the end of the series, seeing him finally get to safety, but also just the impact that it had on his health, his mental life, and also his relationship with the party over time. So it's both a victory story, but also a very sad story of history about someone who was trying to do good and ultimately met with a force that pushed him out and really had a huge impact on his life. I think it was a good show, worth watching. It's short. It's only 6 episodes, so it's not a huge time commitment. And if I had one wish for it, I just wish it had been maybe 8 episodes and we had a little bit more time there. But I think it's a good show worth watching for sure.
I think one of the reasons why we both wished that this was a little bit longer isn't just in terms of going in depth, but it was a world full of characters that we wanted to spend more time with, right? There is a comedic element to this that I think is just as important as the dramatic element to it. There is a lot of fan service for film aficionados in here, with a lot of hints to recent film history. And yeah, just in general, this was a show that I really enjoyed. Again, our sentiments are mirrored here. I just wish there was more of it. A good time for the release, with the finale coming on Juneteenth last week, which is very, very timely. But you can check out all 6 episodes now, streaming on Apple TV Plus across all of your screens. And I'm going to quickly follow on from our recap of the Big Cigar to my up next pick, which kind of follows the theme of Juneteenth. My up next pick this week is We Grown Now, which is a feature film from Minhal Baig, the director of 2019 Apple original film Hala, set in 1992 with best friends Malik and Eric traversing the city of Chicago looking to escape the mundaneness of school and hardships of growing up in public housing. They soon find their unbreakable bonds challenged when a tragedy shakes their community, and I'll leave it at that. I think the trailer is remarkable, and the film, which is rare today, but the film really does follow on that promise that the trailer gives. Very much a film that has stayed with me from a director I hope we see return to Apple's platforms soon. That is We Grown Now, available on premium VOD in the TV app. Comes highly, highly recommended. Also, this past week, another Juneteenth highlight for me was Kendrick Lamar's Pop-Out concert, which featured an all-star lineup of West Coast rappers and cultural figures such as legendary LA youth worker Tommy the Clown and NWA founder Dr. Dre, who we of course all know. It was somewhat of a victory celebration from a recent battle with Drake. I think the stream was like 4 hours long, right? It was a real event. But most importantly, the show ended with the stage being filled with members of different sets within the LA area who are often at war with one another. And that ended with turning the concert into a declaration of LA and I'd say Black unity as well. Really, really powerful like final images from that concert, and you can check that out on demand on Prime Video. Other TV app highlights to keep an eye out for this week include Problemista on Max, A Family Affair on Netflix, Ezra on Premium VOD within the TV app, Out of Darkness on Paramount Plus Showtime, The Beekeeper with Jason Statham. This is one that I cannot wait to watch. It's a silly action film where basically a guy destroys a scam operation with brutal effect. That's coming on July 2nd to Prime Video. Watchers is another one. In a Violent Nature, The First Slam Dunk, which is an animated film that I've been waiting for a long, long time. And finally, the return of a series that I don't know if you actually ever got caught up on, Devon, but The Bear, Season 3. Cannot wait for this. Coming Thursday, June the 27th. Very, very excited. Any of those kind of pique your interest?
I'm so behind on The Bear, Sigmund. They keep making more of it. And, I keep thinking I need to catch up before the next season, and then the next season's here. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. But, it's still on my list. I'm going to get there. And then, yeah, you really sold me on The Beekeeper, too. So I'm actually not subscribed to Prime Video right now, but I might have to jump on it for a month to get access to The Beekeeper.
Now, in addition to my TV app highlights, a sale highlight for this week, because I saw it this morning and it was an instant buy for me. The League seasons 1 through 7 for just $9.99,
wow,
which is a crazy, crazy deal. This is an American sitcom starring Mark Duplass, Steve Rannazzisi, Nick Kroll, Paul Scheer, and Katie Aselton as avid fantasy football fans trying to balance their time between the league and their real lives. It becomes a challenge, though, when the good-natured competition gives way to a win-at-all-cost mentality, which begins to spill over into their relationships and even the workplace. It's a cutthroat competition to win the league, and the bragging rights that come with the feat. The sitcom, which I initially saw on Netflix before, Disney started basically taking all of the FX properties and bringing them into Disney Plus and Hulu. It features cameos by real-life NFL players who play themselves on the series, which ended in 2015. That is my sale highlight for the week. I think a new segment that we'll try and continue when it comes to Up Next Picks.
I'm going to propose a name for this segment, Sigmund. I think each week I should just ask you, Sigmund, what'd you buy this week? And then you should just share with us the deals on the TV app.
And if you did, we'd continue. Mad Max Fury Road, The Boy and the Heron, which were picks from last week, which finally came out this morning on the day that we're recording.
Yeah, your library continues to grow. I'm waiting for you to hit 4,000.
Oh, God.
My Up Next pick this week, I've got two. First one's a little bit self-serving, but I did want to let everyone know that I got to appear on iPad Pros last week. I actually got to guest host the show for its 200th episode, where I interviewed Tim Chatton, who's a friend of this show, about his MacPad setup. He took inspiration from Federico's MacPad and made his own version, so I got to quiz him about different aspects of that, and especially how he's using it with Apple Vision Pro. It's a very interesting discussion, so we'll leave a link to that in the show notes. That's my self-serving Up Next pick, Sigmund. But my real one this week, I did have to take a moment to honor Donald Sutherland, who passed away this week after an amazing and lengthy career in Hollywood. So many things I could choose from to recommend from him. You've got MASH, you've got Clute, got so many others. But of course, what I know him from is the Hunger Games series, where he plays President Snow. Did an amazing job with those movies, and I think kind of brought his talent to a new generation in that way. So that's going to be my pick this week. I recommend checking out The Hunger Games in honor of Donald Sutherland.
Hear, hear. And that is a great pick that ends another episode of Magic Rays of Light. We want to thank you every week for listening, and we do appreciate all feedback that you leave on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can, of course, contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, and you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net with any feedback you have on any of the subjects that we've spoken about on this episode. Devon and I will, of course, be back next week with a look at Fancy Dance and a look back at Acapulco and Dark Matter. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week. Stay cool out there.